So I'll get started. So my name is Diane Truong. I'm the Director of Communications and Operations for Pacific Links Foundation. I'll explain more about what Pacific Links does in a little bit. And so to start, I want to get a little bit more sense of how many people here today are already using technology in your organization. If you can, type in the chat box or put up your hand through Zoom, it'll give me a sense if you're using technology already, or if everybody is still new to the space, or just get an understanding of where we are all in this room today.
Good day, everybody. My name is Anita. I'm from Freedomports Alliance. We are based in Cape Town, South Africa, and at present expanding into Asia, and more specifically into Indonesia. What we do, our focus area is to equip port stakeholders, and we started in airports to identify possible human trafficking and how to engage and interview the possible victim in a trauma-informed manner. So in a period of 1 year just before lockdown, when we were active working under the Authority of Immigration, we had 74 intercepts, of which 15 were children departing from South Africa. Here's the thing, the majority of our interceptees were from Asia: Thailand, Bangladesh, Pakistan, India. And what we hope to get out of, or to start as a community project with all of you, is to draft a register of vetted partners in various countries, so that when we intercept a possible victim of trafficking, and say, for instance, immigration denies them entry, then we know we have a vetted partner who we can contact to say, this person is returning to that port on this flight. And that will reduce the risk of re-trafficking, further exploitation, and definitely debt bondage. So our hope is to build a safety net between countries so that fewer victims disappear into the nothingness of, and the unseen of, hidden trafficking and re-trafficking. Thank you so much, and I look forward to learning from you all. And yes, we have an online intelligence profile or platform that we use, where we profile businesses, people, cars, routes, anything you can think of. So we are very much excited to learn from all of you.
Great, thank you, Anita. And I see some folks sharing in the chat too. I'm very excited to learn more about what you all do, and hope there's ways that we can all collaborate. And I know, like Matthew here mentioned, that he hasn't much experience in human trafficking, but your IT knowledge will come in handy for sure. As you can see, all this technology, like for us as an organization, we didn't start out as a technology organization, so this is something that we continue to learn every day, but we also see the value and importance of using technology. So thank you very much for sharing. Please do chime in whenever you feel you would like to. Feel free to ask questions. Feel free to share your own experience as well. As I go through my presentation, I'll be talking a little bit more about what Pacific Links does and the different ways that we've used technology in our program as a way to help give you examples and hopefully to inspire you of what potentially you can do for the population that you're working in, and what kind of tools that you can come up with to prevent trafficking in your communities. So I will start sharing my screen. Sudha, did you want to speak, or are you just raising your hand? I just want to make sure I give you space.
So I am traveling. I'll speak later after 2 minutes. I raised hand for saying that we use technology.
Okay, perfect. Okay, I just wanted to double check. Great. Can everybody see my screen okay? So to give you a little bit more context in terms of the work that we're doing at Pacific Links Foundation to prevent trafficking, it would be useful to get a little idea more about how trafficking transpires in Vietnam. So Vietnam is considered a source country for trafficking. So for Vietnam, destination countries include those in Asia, such as China, Taiwan, Singapore, South Korea, and Malaysia. Most of being trafficked are female. And so that's about 85%. And often they're trafficked for marriage or labor. In Europe, we see a lot more males who are being trafficked and trafficked for labor. And so we see a lot of different things that come up. We see the deception of migrant workers into exploitative environments. We see death bondage of migrants smuggled into Europe. So Vietnam is considered, so the US State Department has a report that they release every year. So the next one should be coming out soon if it didn't already come out. And so Vietnam is considered on tier 2 watch list. So there's 3 different tiers. Tier 3 is the worst. And so Vietnam is at potentially going to fall into tier 3. And if they do, they'll risk future economic sanctions. And so in a country like Vietnam, that means there's a lot more that can be done. And so in 2019, you probably recall the case of Exit 39. Oh, thank you for letting me know. Okay, let me stop sharing. Okay. Sorry, technical difficulties. So let me share the screen again.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so can you see my screen, the full screen? Okay, I just want to make sure.
Belinda?
Okay, great. So hopefully everything okay. If you don't, then just let me know. So as I was mentioning, speaking about, we have the Exit 39 case that we saw in 2019. So this is a case of 39 migrant workers that are found dead in a lorry in the UK. So what we see from this case is that it spread widespread international awareness to the attention of smuggling and trafficking migrants from Vietnam to Europe. And so driven by economic, familial, and social factors, these migrants will pay upwards of 50,000 euros for their risky journeys to Europe. Families that we've spoken to of the victims who died in this trip, some have told us that they pay so much money for much more money for a BFE trip, thinking that would be safer. And others simply still think that was simply bad luck because they didn't realize that the smugglers had deceived them and their families and their loved ones. And so what we're seeing is that these individuals are trafficked who are looking for a better life for themselves and their families. They're looking for work from home. They're being susceptible to the fake news, the misinformation that they're hearing, especially on social media. So this helps promote some messages that the traffickers are telling them to lure these victims. So a term that we often see in these job recruitments is easy work with high salary. The typical story is that you can make £3,000 in a country. You can work and then pay off that debt in the UK, for example, and then send a lot of that money back home. So people, when they're doing this calculation in their heads, they're thinking, okay, this might be a good opportunity. So they want to continue onwards with it. And so this lack of reliable information about jobs, especially far from home, places these people very susceptible. What is promised as a job may not end up what it is once they get there. And unfortunately, of course, this all leads to people being in modern slavery, especially in debt bondage and exploitation. So, and then to address this, we also see this other issue, is that there's this huge power differential between the individual and the different actors in this as they continue on the migration journey. So the power between, for example, them and the recruitment agencies and the power between them and the employers, these other stakeholders like recruitment agencies and employers, they have much greater power. And so as they're going along, they have less power in what they're doing. And so it's very important that they have continuous information, continuous network, so they can have different support services. They can have safe job referrals. and also related news that's curated and relevant to them so they can stay up to date on all the different trends to counter all these messages. And technology is one of the ways that we can use to tackle all of this, to really scale up these different initiatives that traditionally, for example, we have done at a very grassroots level into the community. So we can use technology to expand all of that work. So for the next slide, this is a little bit about the work that Pacific Links Foundation has been doing. So we've been in this business for over 20 years now. We're woman-led, refugee-led. So that places us at a very unique position in really understanding the people that we're working with. And so all this time, the work that we're doing, having the evidence base, having that is very important. A lot of our work is centered around education and building up different economic opportunities so people are more resilient. We know that the reliable information that I spoke about is very important. And throughout our work, empowerment is key. So working with these vulnerable communities to make sure that they have the tools and skills to build up their resilience. So we do that through education, skill buildings, all of those things. And it's very important that they have tangible alternatives to what the traffickers are telling them so that there's something else that they can do instead. And so this we do through our work with, we have academic and vocational training scholarships, we have specialized camps to develop workforce readiness skills. We also have an online learning platform and skills club. So that's on education front for those who are vulnerable to being trafficked. We also work in the supply chain. So preventing forced labor and working with brands to deploy our fact training in factories for managers and employees, both in person and online. We also have our Rme training program to train migrant women to become leaders in their communities, to transform, bring the knowledge that they have learned from us and bringing that back into their communities. We have an app called Pathwab that we have developed, focusing on workers' well-being and growth. This helps users to make informed choices before they migrate, so they have the right information and trusted information. And at the same time, we also work with trafficking survivors. And with our work with them, we also do a lot around prevention as well. So empowering them with the self-confidence and the skills and the support services so that they can reduce their trafficking risk. And we also build the capacity for our responders in our work. So that includes law enforcement and also like social workers and to help improve support for survivors of trafficking. So is there any questions before I move on to the next one? Great.
I have a question for you, Diane.
Yes.
When you start working with survivors or with returnees, how do you create sustainability for them so that they can bridge into a dignified lifestyle compared to falling back into possible re-trafficking?
Thank you. Yes, that's a very good question. So we place a lot of emphasis on skill building because it's something throughout our programs, including with survivors, because that's something that we know that nobody can take away from them. So once they have the education, once they have the skills, that's something that they can always fall back upon. So in our trafficking, our programs for trafficking survivors, most of the people that we support, they'll stay in our shelter for survivors oftentimes for 1 or 2 years, which correlates to the length of their training program. Because we know we need to address the root causes that got them there in the first place. So if they got trafficked because they're looking for work, we need to find other ways to give them more opportunities, more ways to make a living. And so, education is so important in that regard, because if you go to schooling, even if it's a trade program, you can earn way much more money than if you didn't have an education as similar everywhere. And so it's very important for us to make sure that education. And so we also maintain close contact with the survivors in our program. So even after they graduate from our programs, oftentimes a lot of them will also stay in contact with our program managers because they view us as a second family. They come to us when they have little things, like sometimes when they have fights with their husbands. They come to us when they have a new baby they want to show off. We get invited to their weddings and all these different things. So we become a second family for them as well. So they know they can always come back to us to get support that they need. But the key is that education piece. So this is the education piece that I would like to talk about. This is our work with the at-risk population. So in the last 2 years, especially with the pandemic, this is something that we've been really focusing on and building out, which is our online learning platform. We call that GLOW. And so we have about 2,000 children, high school and university students in our scholarship program. So there's a lot of individuals that we're reaching, and we've really pushed this idea and this concept of self-learning. For them, it's very new. And so it's something that we continue to push, even with the teachers in our programs, to help them understand why online learning is important, why self-learning is important. Because what we have seen is how powerful that can be. Because the students that we're serving in the program that are being vulnerable to trafficking, they're also the poorest of the poor, which means there's a lot of hurdles they have to overcome. They are so much far behind just in general, just because there's a lack of resources in the communities and their schools. And the online learning aspect, the self-learning, is something that can now bring them to a more level playing field. So we have seen how they've been able, because they can self-learn on their own, they can leapfrog their situations in their schools. So we've seen them get better into better schools, get better opportunities. So all of that has been really important in terms of preventing trafficking. So at the very beginning of the pandemic, for example, we saw very positive results from the young people in the program who were really dedicating the time when they're out of school because schools were shut down. They were able to self-learn English, and those that really place a lot of time in that, and then practicing with our online tutors from around the world. After a few months, students who could barely string a sentence together in English, were now speaking fluently. So the different tools and the resources, once they were able to practice and have the people and the resources and tools that we curated specifically for our target audience, the Vietnamese students, they were able to, really thrive on their own. So we decided that after that, this is something that we really need to focus on. And so this is something for the past years we've been really pushing. And we have seen a big difference. So last year we saw 3 students of ours get into a prestigious university in Vietnam, some with full scholarship or nearly full scholarship. And that's something that couldn't have happened before because, one, the school was completely in English. So they had to do everything from their admissions interviews, their essays, all that was in English. And so in a country like Vietnam, for example, English also places you at a very different level. And so without this online piece, this would never happen. And at the same time, we've been able to bring on programming throughout the school for our students. So such as the coffee time workshops that we have, the specialized camps, focusing on building these skills for the workforce, emphasizing STEM and English and career exploration. All these things wouldn't have been possible without the technology at place. And so at the same time, in the past, we would wait until the summer, for example, when we can gather our students, because the way we select our students were spread out over 100 schools. And so having them in one place, such as online, meant that we can really bring them together much more easily. And this also gives us a role to bring role models from around the world, like us here today, being able to join the session. Without this online tools, we wouldn't be able to have that opportunity. And so the initial hurdle was getting them to use it at first. Just like all of us, being pandemic, we had to all learn how to use Zoom, for example. The students had to go through the same thing. But once they all got used to it, this is another matter that we can bring resources to them. So we just wrapped up our summer camp today. And so with that summer camp, we had over 300 workshops led by 100 volunteers from all over the world. And again, that's something that enabled us to come together. So of course, this also means for us, we had to provide internet access. But luckily in Vietnam, it's very cheap. And then tablets for these students. Some are able to access tablets or cheap smartphones. So they're still able to go online, but having the tablets also help them have a better equipment to be able to learn online as well. So this is one example I want to show of how we're reaching students through online technology. Any questions for this before I move on to the next slide? Another program of ours, this is a program that has traditionally been in person. And so recently this year, we have have a different offering, having the version online. So this is our training and certification program. And so the online format, we have seen the positive from it is that it offers more flexibility to the factories that we're working with to train their workers and managers so they can choose when and how they want to complete the training. And so this training helps people, and especially the brands, internationally and domestic in Vietnam, to understand the different international supply chain laws and what they can do to prevent modern slavery in the supply chain. We also offer certification for proactive prevention and also protecting the workers and the communities as well, and increasing the retention and the efficiency by keeping workers safe and well. So this program not only is beneficial to workers, it's also beneficial to the factories and brands as well, because we're reducing turnover in the factories. We're also decreasing the cost of them needing to hire on more people as people go away. So in a country like Vietnam, what we see is that traffickers will recruit from these factories where people have real jobs and offer them something better. But in reality, these are false opportunities. So the awareness raising in these communities in this format is very important. And so having the online venue, and this we have developed as a self-paced module, so people can take it at their own pace. We have been seeing very successful results so far. So our preliminary results, we have seen about 80% completion rate for the managers and 70% completion rate for the workers. And so this is something that's very promising, because one of the worries that we've had for doing an online module is that are people going to complete it if they're going to be able to do it on their own? And so far we haven't had too many difficulties at all with this. So this is another way that we've been bringing something that we've had in person and bringing it online. And do chime in if you have questions, so for any of the things I'm presenting on. Another tool that we have developed is our Pathwab. So this particular app is focusing on safe migration and workers' well-being. And so this enables users to really think through their decisions to migrate when they're especially looking for work far away from home. We provide job referrals, service recommendations, and upskilling opportunities. And this is all through a trusted network. So we're looking to build ourselves as a trusted network that they can come to. And this is something they can use in Vietnam and also when they go to their destination country. So Pathwab is right now available in both English and Vietnamese. This is something that we're looking to expand out to. It is something that we find is going to be able to really combat against the fake news and misinformation, because it's a vehicle where we can provide continual information. The self-learning feature in the app also focuses on the workforce readiness skills, such as financial literacy, English learning, and all of these are through micro-learning, because we know people, especially in your workforce, you have very limited time. So we're providing bite-sized learning pieces for them. The English language, just with our students, in a country like Vietnam, if you're able to speak English, that puts you at a different level. For example, it could mean you can become a line manager, for example. So that's all the things that we've been placing emphasis on. You can see here on the screen that Pathwab has six different sections here. And then I can also go to the demo shortly as well. So I have a question here on the screen. So this is going back to the online learning platform. So what we have been able to do is we use something called Moodle, which is an open source platform. And through using Moodle, which tons of universities and companies use, we have adapted that for our needs and our students as well. So we've been finding that has been a low-cost solution that we can use and adapt for our own purposes. eTalk is something that we place within the online platform that we had developed, and also connecting them with different tutors who are all volunteers in our programs. And so that's something that we've been using and that we recommend, and it's something that we're happy to discuss further upon as well. And then another question here is about how we can cooperation with the factories and motivate them to engage in our program. So that's a very important question, definitely. So a lot of the brands and retailers that we've been working with, and especially if they ask their factories to have these programs, that places us at a very different position. So having that partnership with the brands and retailers, the factories feel more compelled, because if the buyer is saying, you need to do this program, otherwise we'll source from a different buyer, it motivates them quite quickly to work with us. So that's something that we've been using as a way to get the buy-in from the brands and retailers. And some factories themselves also are very proactive in this space as well, in terms of preventing trafficking in their workforce. We also see the laws, the Transparency Act, so that with all the different global legislation, that's also helped us in getting more visibility and more emphasis on being able to proactively do something about trafficking. And then back to the app for the next screen. So as you can see, Pathwab and interactive tools that really helps workers to understand their future needs. There are different calculators on here that are very specialized for this, to really get people to do the math. Because like the story I told you about Exit 39, people are making decisions because they think mathematically they'll do better. And so these calculators go through, for example, debt repayment. So getting people to understand loan interest and repayment time, living cost comparison, comparing the origin and destination living costs and median incomes. Some of these people have never been away from Vietnam before. They may have never lived in a big city before, so they don't realize and don't grasp the concept that if you go somewhere else, the living cost is going to make a big difference in how much money at the end of the day you'll be able to take home. Broker's fees, getting people to understand the fees and also the repayment of all of that. And there's something that we also have developed called the PHA index. So the PHA index compares the purchasing power parity between origins and destinations as well. So using PHA as something that a lot of Vietnamese people are used to, getting understand like how many bowls of pho that they can afford in Vietnam based on how much they're making versus in a destination country. So this also visibly gets a better idea for people, like, okay, like if I move here, maybe I can make more money, but because of living costs, dollar money, I can afford less things. So this gives people a really simple illustration and sense of, if this is really a good opportunity or not. So one of the questions is that Pathwab was developed for use in Vietnam and be used for other countries. And that's definitely something that we agree with as well. So this is something that we're looking for partnerships on, especially to adapt Pathwab for other languages, to adapt Pathwab for other countries in the different contexts, because a lot of these different tools can also be useful for those contexts as well. And some of it will need to add on more of the cultural piece to make it more relevant for those populations. But that's something that we're definitely looking for partners with and resources and funding so that we can expand Pathwab to more users. And so Pathwab addresses a few different issues like the misinformation. It also addresses finances as well, getting people to understand their calculations, because we see a lot of people falling into the risk of being trafficked because of the debt that they owe. The budgeting tools is something that we also heard from our users that they've used frequently, especially during the pandemic, to calculate their monthly budget, especially when they lost their jobs or they had reduced hours, to really understand how much they can afford. In the insights features of the app, we have a lot more opportunities for micro learning. This is where they can get tailored articles on different relevant information on like the news. They can make better decisions. We also have videos and quizzes for them to really check their understanding. In the careers and job sections, this is where they can find job referrals and reviews about employers. The marketplace and maps is also a place where we can recommend services. So especially if you're moving to a new place, you don't know, where to shop, you don't know where to rent from. So this is a place where people in the community can also make recommendations. And these are people who are also in similar situations. So it helps provide services that hopefully are more useful to them as well. So the next part, I will also demo the app a little bit. So while I stop share screen again. So be patient while I find this symbol. And let me switch the screen. And while I do that, does anybody have any questions? Great. So hopefully you can see my screen again. So what I'm running here is a simulator of the app. The app right now is available on the Android and iOS store. And so this is so I can demonstrate to everybody here on the on my computer here today. This particular app, the version you saw on what I was presenting is a version we're releasing very soon. This version here is the current version right now. So I can go through the calculators to give you a better sense of what that looks like. So for the migration decision calculator, so let's say for my, sorry, I don't know why it went here. Okay, so I've gone to the budgeting tool. So they can input where they currently are. And this is something, like I mentioned, we can definitely add and adapt to other contexts as well. And this is something that when we have more resources, we would love to include. So they can enter in how much money they're currently making. And then from there, they can enter in where they'd like to go. So in the context of the UK, and how much money they've been promised, they can enter all of that in. And then here, it also helps them understand, like, okay, this is what they've been promised in the UK, and this is what the minimum wage is in the UK. So this also helps them think about, like, is this going to be realistic? Because if they've been promised 90,000 VND, which is £3,000, that's almost 3 times the minimum wage in the UK. So if they don't speak English, is that going to be realistic? If they don't have a trade, is that going to be realistic? We also compare the different living costs. So where they currently are in versus the UK, it helps illustrate to them that, for example, in the UK, living costs are going to be 7 times as much. So, and then the last screen shows, like, okay, if this is what they're actually going to make and what the minimum living cost is, then if all of this is true, then it might be a possible safe job. But again, we also warn them about thinking carefully before they decide. Is this net pay? Is this what they're going to end up with? Or are there all sorts of fees or taxes and things like that? We also have a warning on the last page here to really consider the different risks. And then also think about, like, making sure that you have enough information, because what people tell you may not be enough. So we always have this risk warning for people to understand it. So this goes through the migration calculator a little bit. So these other things are quite similar as well, and you're more than welcome to download the app and try it out for yourself. This right now I'm demoing English, but it's available in Vietnamese as well. So the insights is what I was sharing about as well. So these are different units that people can learn. They can take different quizzes. They can watch different videos on here about trafficking and things like that. We also have FAQ on different terms that they may not know what it's about, so we can explain all of that. The community space is something that we will continue to build out. And then budgeting is just a straight budgeting tool to really able to calculate out the wants and their needs. And so this is something that we can continue building on as well as we grow in the future. So that's a little bit about the app itself. If you have any questions, do let me know. And I do have a question from Chris, I see. Oh, Charles, apologies. So your question is about attracting users, installs, and maintaining user activity. Is still needed for time to use the app. Wonderful question. We do see the similar challenges. Charles also expressed that the challenge with their in-person training is still needed to address their target audience and getting people to get used to using the app. So we do see some of those challenges in our work as well. So getting people to install an app, some of the things that we found very useful is leveraging our existing programs. So like the in-person trainings that we're doing for the FACT training or the online training program, our scholarship program. So those are target user base that we already have who are going to be future job seekers or are currently job seekers themselves. We also work with a lot of different partners, so like the recruitment agencies that we have, sharing these tools with them so they can share it along with other people. The migrant groups I spoke about, We also use Pathwab as a way that we'll be speaking about next. We also use the app as a vehicle for them to bring out their communities. We do find that we have also promoted the app through social media as well, for people to download and be more aware of the app. And once people have used and downloaded it, we've also find that there has been word of mouth that also led to more downloads of the app itself. And user activity, in terms of maintaining user activity, some of the things that we've been doing is having incentives for people to use the app. So if they take a quiz, for example, if they read an article, so there's different incentive campaigns that happen throughout the app, and it rewards people for doing things and learning the information. So the more they engage with the app, then the more incentives they receive. And that's a way to also for us to get people to continue using the app itself. We also provide news. So we've also heard people say that they use our app now every day to look for the news instead of going on to Facebook. So different components of our app have also been useful for people in different aspects of their lives. So they are used to using it as a resource. So like during the pandemic, for example, we provided information on COVID, on government benefits that they could get. So thinking about our target audience, we thought about what are the kind of information, what are the kind of things that someone in this space would need, and continuing to build that and grow it in the app so that because the app calculator is something they may only use when they're thinking about going for work. And so what are the other pieces that you can do that they can come back to every day? And so those are the different thinkings that we've had around as an organization in terms of what are the things that we can have on there. And so that's why you also see in our next variation, we'll be growing the job referrals, because people are going to want to find actual jobs. If they say, okay, if I don't go, then what jobs can I go to that is safe? At the same time, we've also built up the service recommendations, and that's something that people also may use on a more regular basis as well. And while we have that capture audience, then we can promote the messages about trafficking and safe migration. And hopefully that answered your question. And we do find it valuable to have the in-person interactions, especially for people who have varying digital literacy. So when people are older, for example, as you mentioned, or people have less digital literacy, the in-person interaction is helpful so we can explain more to them what it is all about. So we do see components positive to both of it, but of course it takes more time. And we've also seen greater adoption as people are more aware of what it is and what is it they can do. And so we also have flyers on our website to explain how to use the app and all those things too. So hopefully that answered your question. And let me share my screen again. Sorry. Okay. So this is one of the programs that I was alluding to, our Rme program. This is an example of how we've coupled technology with our in-person activities. So this program itself has really been focused on transforming migrant women workers to become leaders in their own communities. So empowering themselves, their families and communities with the skills and the networks for safe migration and recruitment. So what we've been able to do is train them, this core network of community leaders and core leaders, train them, and then they transfer the knowledge that they have learned, including the use of our technology, such as the Pathwab and online courses that we have in this program. So do community projects, do monthly meetings that they conduct with their own members in the groups that we have formed, so they can reach out all these other people. And then engaging stakeholders at the same time is also really important, like what I mentioned before, like from the factories, the companies, and recruitment offices. They're one place where they can also help us promote the app that we have developed, for example. And then once they understand why it is important to protect migrant workers and the value that they bring, then the more they're willing and able to do, and to understand that for example, like, it's costing them money to have this huge turnover. And if people are not being trafficked and not leaving because of these false job opportunities, then that would reduce that. So when you talk about it in their language, it also helps them understand why it's important to prevent trafficking as well. And so we see that once these women have all this knowledge and the tools, especially that confidence, and they understand their potential and how they can be leaders in communities, we see them really wanting to learn, wanting to share what they have learned with others, including their colleagues, so that others can stay safe and find jobs as well, and that they can advocate for different resources in the communities. And technology and the tools that we have developed obviously makes all of this much easier, because it's something that they can always refer to. It's something that they can give to others. For example, they can ask others to download the app and all the materials on there, so they don't have to worry about forgetting something. So what we've seen from now, especially through our Rme program, is that our app, for example, has become the on-the-go reliable source for information and self-learning. This is a place people are looking to build up their skills, looking to read the news, all these different resources. So the groups itself is a vehicle for us to also bring out the tools that we have. And so this is another different sets of tools that we have. We've also developed a podcast series for unsafe migration targeting Vietnamese youth. We've also been really active on social media, creating different Facebook groups for our beneficiaries that we're serving to really meet them where they're at. So this targets this particular group here, which is an open Facebook group. This one targets Vietnamese migrant workers globally to provide a space for them to connect and also share continuous information, especially when there's new trends taking place. And then at the same time, it's a place for us to share information as well, because the traffickers aren't on social media, so we must be in social media as well. So meeting people where they're at is something that's very important in our work, and having different ways of sharing the information. So you can see throughout the different examples that I've shown, it comes in different formats to really try to reach people at many different angles in terms of the work that we're doing. Another example that we have is this is our work with Frontline Responders. So what we have conducted is we used to do them before the pandemic in person, but obviously during the pandemic, we moved everything to live real-time online training. So focusing on identification and trafficking survivors, getting people to have a more empathetic approach when supporting survivors and vulnerable migrants. And we have an online support line for responders from anywhere around the world. So we can support them in speaking to when they have a vulnerable Vietnamese migrant and understanding their particular context. And so because we have a deep understanding of the trafficking and also Vietnamese culture, we are in a very unique position to tease out the subtle nuances that can be missed. And then we also have a support line for survivors where they can call or reach us via Zalo, which in Vietnam is a popular Vietnamese messaging app, so similar to WhatsApp. So this is also something that we use to be able to reach out to our beneficiaries and those that we're serving. Is we really think about where are the places, where are they already, what can we use that it's easier for them to adopt. So we try to use tools that they're already using instead of trying to add on new things that they have to learn. So in our trainings for our responders, we also have found that there's been varying degrees of experience, and oftentimes people have limited time for training, or people have different level of experience. So some people may need to know the basics, some people may not need to know as much. And so we're in the process of developing a safe, self-paced online cultural competency modules that we'll be piloting later this year. And then each of these tools, as I mentioned, has really enabled us to connect with each other globally, and also in a more timely manner. So in a lot of these trafficking cases, everything is time sensitive. So we've been able to connect with our partners in Europe, even though we're still here. I'm based in California, example. A lot of my colleagues are based in Vietnam. So while wherever we are in the world, we're still able to support survivors because we recognize that trafficking is a global issue. We have to work in partnerships. We have partners in Europe because that's where the Vietnamese are ending up. But we're also here in Vietnam where we can provide the prevention services. And if people choose to return home, then we need to have that bridge and that connection so that they can continue to be supported. And this all leads to being able to really safeguard the individuals from being trafficked and, of course, being re-trafficked because, and at the same time, all of this work with our responders and our work with survivors has also been very important to informing our prevention work. What are the tools that we need to have in place? How are people being trafficked? And really understanding all those different insights has been really critical to our work. So these are some of the things that we have learned from our work along the way. And so we have seen, sorry, I lost my screen. Okay, so some of the important things that we have learned is that leveraging our networks, including our existing programs, like I mentioned, how we have leveraged the Rme Program, how we've leveraged the factory training program to deploy our different tools, so like the app that we have or like the online resources. We also link things with current and trending issues. So we look at what's happening. So for example, when the pilot program, when we're rolling out our app, it was close to the Lunar New Year. So we took advantage of the Lunar New Year when people are also typically migrating home and traveling to link it with the issue of migration and getting them and having a campaign around the app. We also, like I mentioned before, meet our users where they are. So if they're using Zello, then we need to be there. You know, if they're used to using Facebook, then that's something that we'll use to communicate with them as well. And then also at the same time, providing access to continued information. And that's something that only technology will help us enable in a quicker and faster way, instead of the traditional methods that we have used. And so all of this combined together has really helped us to be able to continue to deploy our applications and our tools and resources that we have. I also forgot to mention that in our work with responders, we also have developed an online forum. This particular online forum is where we have information about the trafficking context in from like Vietnamese media, European media, all these different sources that if you yourself or responders may not have access to, but we have this one-stop shop in this forum where people can access all this information. So when they need it to look in a case, or they can potentially reach out to other responders to help support as well. And so the last thing I want to talk about is partnership. This is something that we feel is very important to be able to do the work that we do today. And so all of you here today, I would love to explore ways that we can collaborate, how we, for example, could bring our app Pasu and our podcast to your beneficiaries, how we can share what we're having existing with your networks itself. And if you're working in a different country or need a different language, ways that we can adapt the app and ways that we can adapt our fact online training for the different countries and languages. So this is something that we feel, or the models that we have spoke about, like the cultural competency and training, we would love to bring that model to other countries as well. So that's a little bit about what we've been doing and working on. I hope that this session has helped inspire you, and I hope to have more discussion with everybody here today. Is there any questions or any sharings from everybody? Like, what are you thinking? I know they wanted to have this be a little bit more engaging, so. Are there different challenges that you found in your work when you're bringing out these tools? I know some people have talked about that.
I want to talk about the technology that we used to. So we at My Choices Foundation in India, we're working on prevention of sex trafficking mainly. And we are listed as top 100 NGOs using technology in prevention of sex trafficking in BSR Tech 100. But the way we use technology is first to do targeted intervention, to identify the areas which are more vulnerable. India is a large country and it is culturally, geographically, linguistically very diverse. So what we try to do understand is, where do we put our resources first? That means we need to understand which places are vulnerable. So we have built a vulnerability mapping tool using big data analytics, and a data analytics company helped that for us, build that for us. And we identify the top vulnerable villages and conduct our awareness program there. And like any others, we started using technology during COVID. a lot. So a lot of trainings that have happened for the field trainers and for grassroots stakeholders. We have over 10,000 grassroots stakeholders spread across the 10 states of country. And these are the volunteer network. So we started training them online in addition to the offline training methodology. And this has helped us build a very strong network on the ground also. And they were able to reach out to us through our helpline. So that's another technology that we use. We have a helpline platform that people can use to call and seek support when they need one. Yeah, and we've also built e-learning modules, and we've hosted that on Udemy last year, and we've already had a few months back, in fact 4-5 months back, we've already have now around 1200 plus enrollees into the course. It's in English. We've also translated, like you mentioned, we have to be customize it to the culture and the language, and we have translated it to 5 languages. And yeah, that's how we are using technology. WhatsApp groups, another avenue that we use. Yeah.
Great. Thank you for sharing. What are some of the challenges that you have faced, especially when deploying out the tools that you've had? Because I know a lot of people here are either looking to get into developing more technology for their work or improving what they're already doing. So is there any learnings you can share from your challenges or lessons that you've learned that have been really helpful?
Yes, sure. The first thing is adoption of technology. Like, there's a resistance. So when we say technology, there's a big thing that, oh, it's something called related to software and all high-tech kind of a imagination. So there was resistance from our grassroots partners. So we are partnering with over 100 NGOs.
Great, wonderful. I think that partnership, what you're saying, is so important in terms of the work that we're doing. So that's why I'm speaking here today, because I would love to find other partners that we can work with. And so there was a question here from Charis about the sustainable model for PASU, how we've been able to manage the costs. And yes, so for PASU, as we all probably know, if you've gone to the app development space, it can be very expensive. So this is something that we are looking to move PASU. Currently, we have in 2019, the organization also started a for-profit entity, a corporate subsidiary under the organization, to be able to bring on other resources for PASU. So in the future, for example, bring on the employers, they can advertise their jobs. So advertisement revenue is one way that we're looking at potentially for PASU as we grow in the future. So we're looking at the e-learning courses as well. So we're looking at different opportunities where we can potentially monetize the app. So there are a lot of different places that we are currently considering for the app to build out in the future. So hopefully that helps answer your question. Right now, the app is free for all users, and that's something that we will keep it in terms of the beneficiaries that we're serving. But there will be opportunities that we can, have if they want more features, for example, or if you want to have a more fuller course. So there are different ways that people have traditionally employed in the app space that we're looking to model after as well. Moodle is something that we use for our online learning platform, so the e-learning. Moodle is something that's open source. So we have been lucky to there are different grants, especially if you're smaller and you don't need to use all of that. So we have it on like a server space. So like AWS, for example, offers free credits. Same with Microsoft or Azure, where you can host your platform. So if you're a small organization, those are great resources to look into to getting those ad credits. Credits for their server space to mitigate those costs. So we also use the resources called TechSoup very often. They have a lot of different software and technology that they offer there for either very discounted rates that we can use as well as an organization to mitigate some of those costs. So we've also been able to rely on a lot of in-kind donations. The app so far has been really bootstrapped from a lot of different resources to get to where it is today. We're also very thankful for a lot of the volunteer support that we've had from, for example, like the user designer for the app herself. She's been volunteering her time to make sure it's a really wonderful user experience. We've also had some support from a small IT support as well, and advice to continue to grow what we're doing. Any other questions or any other ways? I'm happy to discuss anything else that we're learning here today, or anybody want to share from your perspectives in terms of the work that you've been working on yourself, because I feel like there's so much to be learned and shared today. Great. If there's no other questions, feel free to reach out to me at any time. I will share my email in the chat box here. So the easiest is to reach me at connect@facilities.org. We're a small organization, so I get emails there. It's easier to remember. And I am follow up to looking for a partnership. So if you want to, the culture competency training, if you like to bring that to the populations that you're serving, or if you're looking to adopt any of the things that we have, we're happy to discuss. If you want to learn more about how we're using the e-learning and how we've used Moodle, feel free to drop me a line. We're happy to meet and discuss as well. And so I definitely look forward to connecting with all of you. So feel free to stay in touch. Thank you for listening, and thank you for all you've been sharing, and keep up the great work. I know this can be a hard space to work in.